Okay, all right. So, welcome to today's conversation about a topic that I think a lot of us deal with, and that is imposter syndrome. So, we're going to take a look at what is imposter syndrome and some ways that we can overcome it. Okay. So, first of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Michonne Williams, and I am going to be, in this conversation with you to talk about imposter syndrome. And, for me, one of the reasons why I chose this topic is because it's something that I definitely deal with and think about, in my own life. And as I try to take on more projects and get to different levels in my own life and career, sometimes that idea of, what am I doing here and when do I get found out, right? So I am, for my business, I am a luxury wine consultant. I also am what I call a lifestyle consultant because I feel that when you tap into your passion, when you are living on purpose, you have more aliveness. And so I do these workshops and webinars each month to bring up a topic that can hopefully uncover, some area where, once you look at it or take some action on it, it will bring more aliveness to your life. And of course, I love wine. That's part of my passion. It's part of my profit. So that is also how I make my living. So here's a question for you. If you want to chat this in or drop it in the comments, have you ever felt like a fraud? Have you ever felt like, oh my gosh, when are they going to really find out about me? I have definitely felt that from starting a new business as a new entrepreneur, having all those doubts, to taking on more leadership levels in my business. Who am I to be here or to share this information? Even being with you now, some of those things tend to come up. So let's take a look at why this happens and who this happens to, and how we can get around it and kind of get better at stopping it in its tracks. So if you're feeling inadequate, it is totally normal. This comes up. Most people do experience moments of self-doubt. Okay, but it's when these temporary feelings of doubt and maybe feeling less worthy start to become more regular, that then you want to kind of take a closer look at that. Studies suggest that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. Today, we're going to discuss what imposter syndrome looks like and how to overcome the symptoms of it so that you can really step up to the plate and take on more of what you want to take on in your life, and also give yourself more opportunity to celebrate your wins. The imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern of self-doubt where an individual disregards their accomplishments and has persistent internalized fear of being exposed or found out or that fraud, In other words, it's a phenomenon that really just reflects a belief that you're inadequate or incompetent, despite all the evidence around you that says otherwise. Despite the fact that you've been recognized at work for an achievement or appreciated by your family for what you do, you still have this nagging feeling of, a fear of being found out. So imposter syndrome is not an official diagnosis by a psychologist. However, it is recognized as a widespread phenomenon that can lead to other disorders like depression if it's not handled. So imposter syndrome was first identified in 1978 by two psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Hine. In their research, they theorized that women were more likely to be affected by imposter syndrome. But since this area of study has grown, they have now discovered that it affects both women and men. So maybe you haven't openly thought to yourself that you're a fraud. You haven't called yourself a fraud. You haven't called yourself an imposter, but perhaps you have done things like brushed off a success as just luck. I just got lucky that time. Or, hey, I was just in the right place at the right time. So if you've ever had those kind of thoughts, let me know in the chat and just say yes. And let's see, because I do think that's something we're more likely to say to ourselves than call ourselves things like a fraud or imposter. Yeah, so I see some chat there for sure. So these thoughts are problematic because they're harmful to our self-confidence, which can ultimately hold you back from future successes, from achieving your goals. It could hold you back from taking more risks in your life. So when you're having feelings of inadequacy, what's going through your mind? What are those thoughts that tend to kind of get on replay? It's good to identify those so you know. Imposter syndrome can take various forms depending on a person's background, personality, and other circumstances. So an expert on the subject, Dr. Valerie Young, has categorized imposter syndromes into several subcategories. She's identified them as the perfectionist, the superwoman or the superman, the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. So let's take a look at each of these. The perfectionist. If you consider yourself a perfectionist, definitely drop a P in the chat. I'm gonna tell you more about what this is, but I think this is something I see a lot. So perfectionism and imposter syndrome do go hand in hand because these personality types set extraordinarily high goals for themselves. They constantly worry about measuring up to those goals. You might be a perfectionist if you've ever been accused of being a micromanager. You have difficulty delegating, and when you do, you feel frustrated and disappointed in the results. You accuse yourself of not being good enough when you don't reach the goals that you've set for yourself. And you feel as though you and your work have to be 100% perfect 100% of the time. For this personality type, success is rarely satisfying because they always believe they could have done a better job, but that's neither productive or healthy. So the superwoman or the superman, all people who experience imposter syndrome are convinced that they don't measure up to their real deal colleagues, those people who are really doing it. And this subgroup of imposter syndrome people often tries to push themselves to work harder to measure up. You might be trying to be the super person if you stay later than anyone else, you stay later than anyone else at the team in order to prove yourself. If you stay later at work in order to get work done, stay later and beyond doing the work that is necessary to get done. You get really stressed when you're not working and you find downtime wasteful. You have let your hobbies and your passions fall away and instead dedicate all of your time to your work. You feel like you haven't truly earned your title, so you feel pressure to work harder and longer than anyone else around you. Imposter workaholics become addicted to the validation that comes from being busy. Not necessarily the work itself, but if they're busy, they think that they're doing it and getting ahead. The natural genius. So this personality type believes that they should automatically be good at everything they do. So if something doesn't come easily to them, or if they can't get it right on the first time, then that self-judgment starts to creep in. So this might apply to you if you're used to excelling at something without much effort. Perhaps you were the student who always got straight A's in school. Perhaps as a child, when you were growing up, you were always told that you were the smart one or that you were the special one, right? You dislike the idea of having a mentor because you feel as though you can handle things on your own. Exactly. Your confidence crumbles when you're faced with a setback or with feedback that may not be as, delicate as you might like. And you often avoid challenges because it's uncomfortable to try something you're not great at. I totally get this one too. Okay, so the soloist. I mean, a lot of these are kind of resonating with me. So I just want to say, you might find yourself in pieces of all of these or some of these, right? So a soloist, it's okay to be independent, right? And in fact, as Americans, if you're watching this and you're American, we're kind of strive on that. We're taught to be independent. But when you do push away help because you want to prove your own worth, you want to prove that you can do it on your own, you could fall into the soloist category. So here are some pieces of that. You feel a strong need to accomplish things on your own. You often think or say, I don't need anyone else's help. I can do this. And you frame requests for help in terms of requirements of a particular project or issue versus you yourself, the individual, requesting help. And another category is the expert. These people believe that their competence is dependent on how much they know or what they can do. Assuming they will never know enough, they fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. This could be you if you shy away from applying to jobs unless you meet every single educational requirement. You're continually seeking out training or certifications because you think you need to improve your skills to succeed. I think I fall into a little bit of that. I love certifications and training, but I also feel like it's a part of just ongoing personal development. And you've been in your role for some time, but you can still relate to feeling as though you don't know enough. You immediately become uncomfortable when someone calls you an expert. So that's the expert imposter. So what causes imposter syndrome? Factors outside of a person, such as their environment or institutionalized discrimination, can play a major role in imposter feelings. Having a sense of belonging fosters confidence. And if you're in an environment where people don't look like you, sound like you, or think like you, the less confidence you might feel. This is especially true when you belong to a group to whom there are stereotypes about competence, such as women in STEM fields or a minority student at some sort of high pressure academic institution. So there is no single answer for why people experience imposter syndrome. Some experts do say it's just personality traits. Other experts focus on childhood upbringing and memories and behavioral causes. It really can come from so many different factors. And this is why we're going to talk about some ways to combat this. It doesn't matter how it got started or where it came from. The important thing is to kind of start paying attention to when it starts to creep in. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to work through that. So one of the first things you want to do is to start celebrating your achievements. Then make it a point to celebrate the awesome things that you do in some way that you enjoy, just like you would if it was a friend of yours or a family member who had a big achievement. What would you do? You might go out for drinks to celebrate or out for dinner. You might treat yourself to a special gift that you like, a massage or an outfit you've been wanting to have. So treat yourself in some sort of way. Send yourself a card in the mail. Do something to celebrate your success, because when you cheer yourself on, you're going to start rewiring how your brain thinks. Okay, and you'll start to be more susceptible to your accomplishments instead of what you see as your failings. So practice self-love mantras, practice affirmations. So spend some time repeating mantras to yourself that boost your confidence. A great way to do this is to practice I am statements. Those are very powerful statements that start to speak to your brain in a certain way. So I am worthy, I am enough, I have everything that I need, I have something to offer. Start to think, you might want to look at what are the things you might tell yourself when the imposter syndrome starts to creep up, like the whole thing about, oh, I just got lucky. Instead of I just got lucky, I am deserving, So think of it that way. If you want to have more practice at designing affirmations, how to construct them and how to empower them, you might want to take a look at the workshop I did on the art of affirmations, which is also here on the BNOV TV channel. But tell yourself something positive and uplifting whenever you start to feel those negative thoughts creep in. It's another way to start to rewire your brain. Be mindful of the way you treat yourself. So yes, it's totally okay to be humble, but if you're always rejecting praise or compliments, you're not really doing any favors to yourself or to your confidence. If you're serious about trying to shift the way that you think about your own success, then you need to start receiving, receive the compliments, receive the acknowledgement, receive the recognition. So if someone compliments, you, a nice response is a simple thank you, right? So start to think of that as well. Learn to take mistakes in stride. I know for myself, when I make a mistake, immediately the conversation, the little voice, the conversation in my head starts to creeping in. How could I have done that? How could I have made that mistake? I should know better. I should be better. Those are my conversations. So, the one thing to take notice, mistakes are a part of learning. And I love this quote by Thomas Edison, where he says, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that will work. So making mistakes are part of the learning process and the improving process, right? So everybody makes mistakes, regardless of how perfect they may seem. The trick to moving forward and doing better next time is to not dwell on what went wrong. Sometimes mistakes are really a blessing in disguise. So I like to ask a question, can you think of a mistake that you made that actually made some area of your life better or made a situation better in your life? And if so, put mistakes in the chat or in the comments. Act before you're ready. I love this. So many times people think they have to have it all together. They have to have read all the research. They have to have had all, the conversations or whatever it is before they get started. And that's actually not the best way to boost your confidence. In my business as a wine ambassador, we do often wine tastings. And one of the pitfalls I see people making is they feel like they need to have it all ready, have it all the wines understood first, or have all of those things memorized. And that's not actually the most empowering or the most fun way to go about sharing wine with people, right? So you can just step into it, right? You have some guidance, you have some tools, but there's never really going to be a perfect time to do something, whether it's leading a wine tasting, to maybe starting, your passion project, to maybe asking someone out on a date, So what you want to do is just go for it. Just, rip the Band-Aid off. You want to press send on that email. You want to submit that application. You want to go for that position. Do whatever it is that you're afraid of, because people are rarely 100% ready to do anything. And even if you are ready, you're still going to probably feel the butterflies and the nerves, right? So the trick is to take the first step. So don't count on external validation. No one, not even your boss, should have, or a parent should have, more power than you to make you feel good or bad about yourself. You can't control the way other people will treat you or how people will react to your work. If you're always striving to get that stamp of approval in order to feel good about what you've done, you may never get what you're looking for. Don't let that drain you or hold you back from continuing on your journey, your path, okay? So if you do place a lot of power on external validation, I know, that's something too we all work on. It's most people deal with that. So most people are dealing with that, looking for external validation. So it's one of those things that we can all work on. So review what you've recently accomplished. So if you're feeling down on yourself for not doing enough, make a list of all the things you have done. You know what I'm saying? We get into that habit of making our to-do lists and all the things that we need to do, all the things we haven't done, all the things that haven't been crossed off the list, right? Try something new, try something different. Make a victory list or a journal of all the things you have done, all the things you have accomplished. I mean, look at all the wins you've had from way back in life. I'm talking about things from, riding your bike for the first time, maybe when you graduated from high school or college, maybe when you got your first job or the promotion that you were striving for. Maybe it's when you, found the love of your life, like write down all the wins, and really start to have this list of victories that you can reflect back on whenever you're feeling a little shaky about your accomplishments or your abilities. And if you like, even go ahead and ask, a coworker or a loved one to, give you some ideas as well on what they've seen you accomplish. Okay, that even will broaden your list. That will make your mind blow, because when you hear from other people about what they see about you and your accomplishments, it's heartwarming, and you really get the sense of who you are. So often we let the bad stuff overwhelm the positive elements of our life. And so by reminding ourselves of the positive, you can provide yourself with the evidence that you're looking for and the evidence that you are doing great things in life. And I love what you're saying here. Yes, we recently started to-do lists. Yes, instead of to-do lists. I love that, Marian. Thank you. That's awesome. So go ahead and talk about your feelings. So sometimes, we do need a little extra help to get to the other side of the feelings that are not making us feel so good. So if you can't, really wrap your head around doing the mantras or the affirmations or coming up with your list of accomplishments, you might want to definitely reach out to a friend, a loved one, or even if you need someone else, like a professional mentor or a therapist, counselor, to help, then do that. Or find online groups and do that so you can tap into, a positive group or a way to outlet on your feelings. There's no shame in reaching out for support, especially when you're dealing with things that are, maybe debilitating in your confidence. So that's a little bit about imposter syndrome. I've got some sources that I love to share that will email to everyone who has registered for this webinar. But I do want to say we covered a couple things about, where imposter syndrome might come from, but more than that, what are the types of imposter syndrome that you can look at and see if you can identify that in yourself, and better yet, what are some ways that you can combat imposter syndrome. So in the chat or in the comments, maybe share a takeaway about what you might think you might do if you ever feel like imposter syndrome is creeping up. What are the techniques from this webinar that you can see yourself using the next time that happens? And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. We had a little bit of a quicker workshop and webinar today. That works. Again, my name is Michonne Williams. You can follow me on Instagram at Be the Wine Life. Also, please go ahead and find and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That is very much appreciated. Or if you're interested in finding out more about, my passion, that pays, which is my business as a wine ambassador, please go to Facebook and you can search a wine career, enter the wine world, and join our private Facebook group there to learn more about wine and also some business practices as well. So thank you so much,